Appreciate that. Thanks for this awesome morning, and look forward to learning more from our panelists. So let me first start with a quote from Muhammad Ali. The fight is won or lost far away from witnesses, behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road long before I dance under those lights. As stated, my name is Jason Dunn, GVP for the Cincinnati USA Convention and Visitors Bureau, where we believe that tourism empowers communities and communities empower cities. That quote stated by Muhammad Ali is one of my favorite ones and speaks to the power of Black culture and the importance of perseverance, tenacity, and pride. And in fact, it embodies a sense of consciousness that feeds the soul and gives courage to the reader to be their best selves when it's time to perform. But there's an important lesson that's silent in that quote, and I want to talk about this morning. And it is, are we, the Cincinnati region, cultivating an environment where Black culture supports Black talent? And this morning we will answer that question and get to know our esteemed panelists. In 2020, I believe it's very important that we empower voices that are supporting Black culture and Black talent. So I will yield to the panelists to introduce themselves and talk about who they are prior to us getting into the conversation. Let's start with John and G. Just talk about kind of who you are in a couple of minutes, and knowing that we have a very short span of time due to us stopping at 11:45. But I want you all just to kind of give some quick tidbits about yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is John Faraday. I am the director of the Mercantile Library, which is downtown, and we bring in authors, and authors are smart, and then they talk. So that's as fast as I can go. And I'm friends with G, which is as important.
My name is G Horton. I'm a visual artist, Cincinnati-based visual artist. I'm also serving as the Mercantile Library's first African-American artist in residence. I've been commissioned to do this incredible piece behind us, Peter H. Clark, who is the Mercantile's first African-American member. And just a little bit about my practice. My practice primarily is rooted in highlighting the beautification and also the complexity of the Black and brown experience. And I do that through the graphite and charcoal pencil.
Thank you. Crystal Howard, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Crystal Howard, Head of Corporate Communications and Media Relations for Kroger. So what does that mean? I'm the company's publicist, but really thrilled to be here with everyone today.
Bishop Thomas.
Good morning. My name is David Thomas. I'm the senior pastor of the New St. Paul Baptist Church, downtown Cincinnati in the West End.
Thank you. Fran Santangelo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fran Santangelo. I am the Director of Marketing and PR for the Cincinnati Music Festival presented by P&G. A native of Cincinnati and worked in the family business since I was allowed to.
And Means Cameron.
Hello, everyone. My name is Means Cameron. I am the owner, creator of BlaCkOWned Outerwear, also the owner of Black Coffee Lounge down here on Elm Street. And I am pleased to be in company with such great Cincinnati leaders.
Let's jump in. Thanks, guys. Let's jump in. So, let's start with you. How does your organization influence Black culture?
We influence Black culture. We created our brand clothing, BlaCkOWned Outerwear, and we've been able to influence Black culture. I mean, mainly through being representation in our community. From the designs to the story to the people that we've been able to support in our community, we've been pushing, Black culture. I think it's also in our name, which was important for us, is to just be very, what I've been hearing throughout the day, intentional about what we wanted to promote. And our influence has, although it originated and started here in Cincinnati, we've been fortunate enough to be able to impact Black culture on a national scale. And that has been done through clothing and storytelling.
Yeah, that's good. And I know, to your point, nationally, Roland Martin and others, we see wearing your brands and et cetera. So you're absolutely right. I mean, that's good stuff. Let's Crystal, can you speak to you're an implant or not from Cincinnati, you're from Houston, right? Or Texas, correct? Austin, right?
Yes, a little bit. So a life divided. So
Okay, all right, okay,
yeah, my hometown is Austin,
okay.
but I went to college and in many ways grew up and became the professional that I am in Houston. So lived in Houston for 15 years before moving to Cincinnati. And certainly, you know, most people recognize Houston for a number of things, but kind of my pride point, it's the home to Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion. So we can all appreciate
Okay,
that.
all right.
But yeah, but I moved to Cincinnati 3.5 years ago to join Kroger at the national level. And uniquely, Kroger plays an interesting role. And I think not a lot of people realize that Kroger is a Fortune 23 company that has a footprint across the US. So we operate nearly 2,800 food retail stores. We have a growing and thriving e-commerce business. But then we also employ 500,000 people, and 500,000 people who are Black and brown and other races and other sexualities and religious orientations. So for us at Kroger, when we think of the role that we play in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's using our scale, it's using our influence in our platform to engage with our employees, as well as those 11 million plus customers who engage with us online or in store every day.
So when you were looking to come to Cincinnati to means kind of conversation, is what did you find greeted you as it relates to Black culture, and what has kept you here this far?
Yeah, and I love the question. And it was, you know, full transparency, like it was a hard move moving from Houston to Cincinnati. It's a different region. It's the Midwest, you know, living in Houston. It's you know, a touch of the South. But it was a hard transition. And, you know, conveniently, I had been to Cincinnati for business trips over the years. I've been with Kroger for 10 years now. I started my career with Kroger leading comms for the PR in Dallas markets. But I will say kind of one point of, I guess, maybe shock and anger when I first moved here, and, you know, we're right there on Vine Street. I can remember like walking out for lunch one day, and the disparity hit me in my face, just to see so many addicts and addicts who were Black, addicts who were brown, addicts who were white. And I think in that moment, I hadn't seen that when I came here just to like visit and drop in, and it was a very curated experience. But I think in my first few weeks and months of living here, I realized that, well, this is a thriving city, but for some. So that was one of my kind of, I guess, first interactions and thoughts about Cincinnati. But since I've been here now 3.5 years, and, you know, we were speaking about it as part of the larger session earlier, what I have grown to appreciate, and I look at Means, and I spent some time with Means a few days ago, is the number of Black business owners here, ranging across a variety of industries. So whether that's construction, whether that's beauty, apparel. I think of Derek Brazil and his taco business. So when I think of what has kept me here, a sense of community, a sense of people who are innovators and dreamers and doers, who I'm all inspired by.
Yeah, that's cool. So a follow up to that. So, well, to Bishop, let me Bishop, get you in here. So to Crystal's point and to Cam's point, you know, creating that culture of the Black experience, and the Crystal kind of coming in from out of town and seeing and creating the roots and community. You know, faith has played a very important part in the Black experience. Can you speak to how faith could be a determining factor in fostering a strong Black culture and the retention of Black talent?
I believe that faith is the thread for most of us in our experiences from childhood up. And when we understand how faith plays a role in the foundation, it gives us the ability to build relationships and to encourage one another and to network with one another. It is then crucial for us to be able to have that foundation so that, for example, 2020 has dealt most of us a very, very difficult hand. And the thing that sustains us is not what's happening in Washington or Columbus or whatever that state house might be, but it is what we believe, that foundation that keeps us grounded and rooted, so that whatever the calamities of our lives, we have something stronger, bigger, that sustains us and then gives us the focus that we need to be able to bounce back or to be able to reimagine our life beyond the pandemic or beyond the difficulties that we may experience.
John and G, you know, Bishop talked about the different experiences and the foundations, and Crystal talked about coming from different places here. And Means talks about capturing the culture of what visually seeing what Black-owned means. Kind of speak to the Mercantile Library's history and what it means for G to become the first African American to be involved in the library, and to speak about Peter Clark and that experience as well.
Absolutely. I'll start. We, you know, we've spent years trying to, here at the library, trying to be more representative of our community, because frankly, we weren't. And it was pretty obvious the first day you walked in, and I knew we needed to fix it. And that happens on 1,000 different levels, but a really important piece, and you know, it doesn't speak well of me, but it took me a couple of years to realize. One day I was walking through the library and I realized every piece of art, every image, every sculpture, every painting is of a white person by a white person. And, you know, I'm embarrassed it took me that long to realize it, but you know, as we're trying to be welcoming to the entire community here at the library, I realized someone would walk in and say, well, I'm not even on the walls here. So we really want to fix that. And Peter Clark is a big deal to us. He's our Jackie Robinson. He was our first African-American member, our first Black member at the time. And it was a big deal. And so we needed, I thought, well, all right, I know the person we want to paint, but now I got to find the right person, the right man or woman to make it happen. And a good friend of a lot of people on here, Tamara, set me up with G, and right away I was like, all right, this is the guy. His work is great. He's really smart. He's the right man for this job. He, you know, incredibly likable, as everyone knows G, but he's also got a backbone. So like, don't, you know, he's the right man for the job, and this is going to be incredible. And we could probably have had it done a couple months ago, but we decided collaboratively that we want to wait, because
it's 11 o'clock.
When we unveil this painting, we're going to have a blowout of a party doing it. So we're going to wait a little bit. And G can talk a little bit more about Mr. Clark and this painting, because I can tell you the library is so happy with how this is coming along.
G, before you jump in, I want to really kind of dig a little bit to see kind of how does it make you feel being the first one? What's the pressure on your shoulders feel like, and then what do you hope the outcome is after the portrait is unveiled?
I mean, honestly, there's no pressure, man. The pressure it lied on folks like Peter H. Clark, who, you know, in the 18th century, it was unheard of to enter white space, right? So to me, that's pressure. That's real pressure. For me, it's an honor to be able to step into this space and really bring this man's story to life, you know, visually. That's the only pressure that I have, is to make sure that I do it in a way in which it's honoring him in the best way possible. Because, you know, Mr. Clark, like a lot of African Americans who paved the way for so many of us, I don't know how many of their stories are really brought to life. A lot of them tend to be hidden figures. So for me, the pressure lies in the fact of making sure that I execute this project to the best of my ability, my artistic ability, but also allow this to be a piece of work that introduced folks to not just Mr. Clark, but the Mercantile as well, and educate them around some of the incredible strides that he made in our community. I mean, when you think of Clark, a lot of people don't know that Clark Montessori High School was named after him. A lot of folks don't know that he paved the way for educating and training a generation of Black teachers who came to our city looking for a better quality of life. And I think he faced so much pressure. So for me, it's really, it's a blessing and it's an honor to be in this space and get connected to such an iconic figure in this manner.
So I think to your point, talking about John's role in the discussions, it kind of leads me to the next panelist for Fran Santangelo and kind of speaking about allyship and developing a culture of importance. So Fran, can you kind of speak to the partnership? The festival, for one, is $107 million economic impact for 2.5 days, which is the largest regional or largest economic booster to the region for almost 60 years. So I think there's kind of a economic piece to us that we have within the region, but we may not necessarily appreciate it or have not appreciated it. Kind of speak to your impact from the festival to Black culture in Cincinnati, and then some of the reinvestment things that you have been a part of with the Vibe platform, IHL, and giving back to making sure that there is a diverse workforce of the hospitality and what that means to you and your family.
So I think the economic piece first, having that study done and realizing how much of an impact we are making on the region, we meaning the festival as a whole, I think was eye-opening for so many people, and it brought a whole new level of pride to the festival itself. Cincinnati has a lot of events that come and go year after year that are kind of one-offs, and the fact that we bring this money in annually, when there's not a pandemic, of course, when we are in a normal year, we're bringing this money in annually. I think that value just kind of took us to another level in a lot of people's eyes in the region. And it being a predominantly African-American event just brought a whole new level of pride to that too, I think. I don't think people had any idea of the impact that we have on the region. And I don't think a lot of people, meaning I don't think the hotels really knew. I don't think that the city really knew. I don't think that moms and dads sending their kids to school really knew. I think it was eye-opening for Cincinnati as a whole to see that we have this. It just brought a huge level of pride to this event being held in Cincinnati annually. So I think that's great. I think, the give backs that we've been able to do to the community, my partnership with you, Jason, and the IHL is a soft spot in my heart because I love the fact that it's taking real life skills and teaching them in the schools. I think so many times, in the school systems, you wonder, okay, am I going to be using any of this information out in the real world when I get a job? So I think the program of IHL is so exciting that the kids get to actually be put in real life situations, whether it's cooking at a hotel or learning customer service at a front desk. I think that's stuff that is priceless and they'll use it for a lifetime. Also realizing how impactful the hospitality industry is in Cincinnati. Will you remind me the statistic that it's how many percent of all jobs in Cincinnati are in the hospitality industry? I hear the statistic and I think it's always so shocking. It's
2 in 7 jobs, 2 in 7 jobs.
Okay, in all of the jobs in Cincinnati, 2 out of 7 are hospitality industry jobs. Correct. I think that was eye-opening to me. And so the more kids we can encourage to get into that workforce here in Cincinnati, especially diverse kids, I think it's going to be great for our region.
Thank you for that. And I think that goes to, let's move over to Crystal. Crystal, can you speak to, as we develop the culture, we've talked about how we have a culture. We talked about the importance of allyship. We talked about the importance of recognizing self, and we talked about how faith is important. Kind of speak to your other project with Flow and what that means to the region and your involvement and the outcomes that you hope to push forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So Flow, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is an extension of Arts Wave, and it was developed in partnership with Alicia Kittner, as well as Mel Gravely and Mary Stagaman. And really, it was developed to create a vehicle for Black artistic expression. When we were in the developmental phase of Flow back in 2019, which feels light years ago, we really put our heads around where are the greatest opportunities in Cincinnati? And one of the biggest opportunities that we identified is places and spaces and moments and events and experiences where people can engage with and experience Black artistic expression. So whether that's dance, whether it's art, and certainly like just especially of the caliber that G does, whether that's song, whether that's fashion, whether that's poetry. And certainly 2020, upended many of our plans. This was our launch year, but we were able to successfully bring in the Dayton Contemporary Dance Center in, and we did a performance, which was amazing. And just, it was such an unexpected experience for so many people. And since then, we've been able to collaborate with Rico Grant through Palooza Noir and help to bring Black and Brown faces to life at the museum. But it's just an amazing vehicle and avenue when you talk about retention of talent, when you talk about attraction of talent to the region. It's a platform and a vehicle to create a sense of community for people who not only love Black art, but just love art. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that I see in Cincinnati. And I think certainly progress is being made, but more places and spaces that are blended, where it's not just a Black space or a white space, but it's a Cincinnati space. It's a space for anyone who appreciates whatever that venue or that moment is offering.
I think you made some important points about it being a space that's welcoming. If you do the stats, I think as the demographics show that the country is browning. And if you look at the various demographics, in some from I think 18 to 26 years old, I believe that is already a minority majority. So if we're looking at the value of Black talent, and we know that culture is important to keeping Black or brown talent into a destination, or into a city. Sorry, my tourism hat is coming on, sorry. I think it's important to kind of realize some of the things that we're talking about. So the partnerships that we see between John and G, the partnerships between the festival and Vibe and IHL and Bishop Thomas with the faith community kind of being as well spread it out. So means I guess I'm getting back to you on kind of speak to your partnership with the Bengals and what does that mean? And then we're going to kind of drill down into the definition of value and what that means. And then how do we look at it from a talent perspective? Now that we've spoken about the culture, let's really dive into the talent of this. And then how do we retain those? So let's go ahead with you.
Yeah, in our most recent partnership with the Cincinnati Bengals, very big moment for us as a brand. We feel like, in this particular instance, it was an opportunity for us to basically stand in line with someone who already has that audience that we're trying to reach. And in a lot of cases, we talked about this earlier, brands like ours just don't have the marketing dollars, also the resources to be able to really put on the proper campaign. And, there's a lot to be said about the Cincinnati Bengals through the years. But we thought, it was the Cincinnati Bengals who reached out to us. And that was important because, we didn't expect it or we didn't see it coming. So for us to have this opportunity to really utilize what the Cincinnati Bengals have been able to do in the city in terms of building a brand, we wanted to piggyback on that. And we thought that this was the perfect opportunity to make a statement in Cincinnati about what it looks like to have healthier communities. And these are conversations that aren't easy to have, but fashion is fun, art is fun. And when you tie those two things together, you can get some progress. So this collaboration is huge in itself because you don't typically see it, one. Two, the Cincinnati Bengals, this new program that the NFL launched is not a program for the NFL teams to partner with minority-owned businesses or even Black-owned businesses. Is specifically just to partner with local businesses. So for the Cincinnati Bengals to go out there and make the statement, hey, we don't want to just partner with a local business. We want to be intentional right now in this moment and be consistent with the statements that our players have made and everything that they have going on. We want to be intentional and we want to work with Black-owned. And just being able to put, our logo, which I've mentioned before, which it is what it is, and it's beautiful, and it's a reminder that ownership is an option for our community. So to put that patch right there next to the NFL logo or the Bengals logo, that's big because it does two things. It presents us in front of a larger audience, but it also shows those people who have been following our journey over the 10-year run that these type of things are possible. And we can do greater things in our city, whether you start out the trunk or you start with this, big rollouts like some of my friends that spoke on here earlier. So yeah, I think that we're right on target right now, and the Cincinnati Bengals wanted to make that statement, and we'll continue to push forward in this type of capacity.
Here's what I hear you saying, and congratulations on that piece. But I hear you saying that you looked at self-identifying of who your company is. I hear you saying that your brand that speaks directly to you, directly to your community is very important, is intentional. And I also hear you saying that people had to be vulnerable to reach out, to want to empower or be a part of the brand that is okay. I mean, I think that's where some corporations are missing the point, that instead of being intentional about the groups they're talking to, they kind of make it a general kind of a piece or swipe, and not really focused on a group that they're going after. They're not talking to the group. And I think that's where we kind of get sideways at. So I want to go to Crystal to kind of talk about, let's see, do you believe, or tell me, what are the challenges that Cincinnati faces in retaining Black talent?
Yeah, and I would go back to, my initial comment. I think when you talk about Black talent, like we have Black moms, we have Black dads, we have Black cousins and nieces and nephews. And every Black person that I know here, they want to see the entire community rise, not just those, working for the corporations or the entrepreneurs. Like, we want to see the community rise. So I would say that would be one of my leading points. And I think, again, even in the short time that I've been here, I've seen so much progress, whether that's through Palooza Noir or Cincy Nice, or again, what Means has done at Black Coffee, but just more spaces and places where people feel a sense of community, where they can connect, where they can disconnect. Those are all of the things that Black talent that we look for when choosing the city that we want to live in, that we want to play in, that we potentially want to raise children in. So I would say those are kind of two of the opportunities. Well, more so the first one being one of the bigger opportunities, and the second, I would say kind of what's working and what we need to continue to invest in.
So do you believe that there's support in Cincinnati for upward mobility of Black talent?
I think it's growing. I think those of us who, I guess, are part of this quote unquote, like upwardly mobile group, I think we're all really connected. I will say from a welcoming standpoint, I think of the yoga studio that I go to. Oftentimes I'm the only, person of color there. And I remember when I first started going there, like I received, and it was, I guess in some ways, unwelcoming looks, or maybe like they were trying to place me, like, okay. And maybe that's just a Cincinnati thing of like, she's a new face and we're trying to place like, okay, is she, affiliated with someone, or what the story was. But I think we're making inroads. And I think, certainly the work that I do and the work of several others on this call, it's continuing to change the narrative, which then I think changes the city's narrative and like just the level of welcomeness and openness that we all have.
So, thanks. So John and G, I want to kind of get you in here, because again, I think as we talk about getting to the point of yes, and getting to the point of inviting folks and changing hearts, and providing an open space to be welcome. Kind of, John, walk through the why. What was the why that changed your mind to invite G to be a part, and what was the why that gave you the sense of urgency to kind of change the history of the Mercantile Library? And then G, I want you to speak to how his why may or may not be kind of tethered to your experience with the Black Lives Matter mural. And kind of what that meant for you as we kind of think about the preservation of Black talent and Black culture.
I can tell you I decided that we really needed to bring in the best speakers. And we've always wanted to bring in the best speakers here to the library, but I think maybe we had a little bit of a narrow view of what the best speakers look like. So, you know, everyone here has heard well, as long as they're qualified.
Yeah.
I mean, so when we broadened our view of who the best writers and speakers are, not only did we not take a step down, we took a step up in terms of the people we were bringing into the library. In the last couple of years, we brought in Claudia Rankin, Zadie Smith, Colson Whitehead, and Chuck D. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these are the best thinkers and writers in our country who happen to be Black. So I think all we did was say, we're going to bring in the best. And it's going to really be the best, not the best old white guys who have been writing books for 70 years. So that was intentional.
John, so let me ask you, man. So that's interesting you said that. So you have to have some sense of security, though, with yourself to know that there are people who are better or who are operating at a higher level that will not compromise the integrity of old thinking or archaic thinking. So for me, let me commend you on that for you keep going, because that is in itself is a statement to what you believe. So I just want to make sure you know that publicly I'm saying congratulations on that. I'm serious, because a lot of folks who are in positions of power now are insecure. So they're not going to let people who not have been stamped as better or maybe operating or as good as who they consider better to be in the same room. So the fact that you came to that realization is dope to me. So let me just say that. Gee, I said it was dope. So in front of everybody, it was dope.
Thank you. I learned a lot a few years ago. I did a story on Merck and Means and the opening of BlaCkOWned. I was a reporter at the Inquirer, and it was such a wake-up moment for me, because I just wrote a story about these two guys because they were doing an interesting thing. That was my job. And so there's a big picture of Merck and Means on the cover of the paper, and my phone rang all day from older African-American women in our city calling and saying, thank you so much. We never see Black people on the cover of this newspaper unless people are under arrest. And that was so depressing and so horrifying. I mean, we were just doing the right story on two really interesting guys. That was such a wake up for me, and it changed me. That day changed me in ways that I did not expect. And then we get to bring in G. There's not a lot of people who can do this. I've told him, if you gave me 1,000,000 years and 1,000,000 pencils, I couldn't do a bit of this. So G takes it seriously, and that was intentional. Some things, well, earlier I said, we're just going to bring in the best. We don't care what color they are. They happen to be Black. But this piece of art, I thought we very purposefully needed to pick an African-American artist. It seemed like the right thing to do, who would put his heart into it. Because this is an interesting, complicated guy. And he got screwed in, he was a public school teacher, and he was a public school principal, and he was advocating for integration. And he was a pain in the ass, but he got it done. And then they said, well, congratulations, Peter. We've integrated the school, but we can't have a Black guy as the principal of white kids. So you're out. I mean, it was like, so this man deserves to be celebrated, because I bet you he saw that coming. And he got shit canned, and he was really good. So we needed the right man to paint this portrait.
G, what are your thoughts? And talk about, the Black Lives mural and what that meant to you, and then, you being recognized as one of the best. What does that mean to hear that, to hear him say that?
Well, yeah. I guess to go back to your initial question on the why. because the why to me matters. You know, I think my why is rooted in my mission, which is all about how can I use my art as a vehicle that can transform space, but also inspire, honestly, the next generation of young artists and leaders. And when I was looking at this opportunity, you know, to take on this residency, but also take on the task of bringing Mr. Clark to life, you know, it was an automatic yes to Clark's story, right? But then I had to vet through whether the Mercantile was the right space. And what does the Mercantile Library mean to me? What does it mean to our community? And really taking a deeper dive into looking at the intentionality of this institution. When you look at their history and where the program, what the history has been and what the programs reflect now, which has been intentionally designed to be more inclusive. It has been intentionally designed to be more welcoming for all walks of life. And just knowing that reality was an automatic yes for me. So I tend to vet through opportunities in terms of, does it, you know, the question I ask myself is, does it align with where I'm going as an artist? And that's the same thing that happens with the Black Lives Matter mural. It was, I mean, it wasn't even a thought. It was an automatic yes. It was more so me waiting for the opportunity for it to happen here in the city. And I also want to be clear to the audience, to let everybody know that it was a team of us. It wasn't just me. It was a collective of 17 other incredible Black artists who are in this community, who also are doing incredible work. And just to touch on that, just for example, the fact that the mural lies right in front of City Hall is transformational. For city council and for our city officials to come out and they see that Black Lives Matter is right there on the street as a daily reminder that we do matter and we're not going anywhere. But also, I think it's also beautiful to acknowledge the fact that that mural was created in 5 days. 5 days. It was a simple phone call. It was a combination of folks getting on the call and dropping everything they needed to do in order to make that happen. So, you know, as we talk about how do we elevate our city and the profile of our city, and also how do we recruit talent to stay in the city, I think it's important that we tell these stories. I think it's important we tell the stories on how a mural like that comes together. I also think it's important that we highlight people like Means, who, you know, who started selling merchandise in his trunk to now having an incredible partnership with the Bengals, right? I think it's also important that we tell stories like individuals like Crystal, who's coming from Texas, who's making a footprint with the work that she's doing through Flow, which I personally am benefiting from, you know, because I'm also an artist who participated in the Black and Brown Faces exhibit at the Cincinnati Art Museum. It's those type of stories that I think that we can tell that can potentially be an incredible asset to recruiting Black talent to come to our city and say that they want to live, work, and play. And also just my selfish plug, I mean, 6 months ago, I was working in the corporate space and I was doing art on the side, but to completely transition and say, you know what, I want to take a shot on myself and focus on my art and have a community of leaders and folks in our community to say, what can we do to help you be successful? I think those type of stories we need to highlight more, because there's an incredible Black ecosystem of thriving young talent artists and creators who are really trying to transform the city, but we won't know about it. The world won't know about it until we highlight those stories.
I think so. Let's break down the definition of value. You know, it's the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. Like your support is of great value. So for me, as I'm looking at the panelists whom are here, it's fair to say that in no disrespect to you, Crystal, or myself, because we work for somebody, in respect to you, but I think for the four of you who are independent, I think it's very interesting to me to kind of get your perspective, particularly Bishop. You know, there are many Black professors in Cincinnati that are wanting to leave Cincinnati due to the impact of racism and the mental fatigue of fighting. Can you kind of, you know, what would you tell them from an inspirational perspective? What would you tell them when they wake up in the morning before they go to bed, what they should do?
Well, for me personally, my personal motto that I remind myself each and every day before I leave my home is that my desire to succeed is far greater than my willingness to fail. And when you're willing to do whatever you need to do, get up and work hard at it, and live your true vision, purpose, and fulfill your potential, then whatever the challenges, especially racism, that may come your way throughout the course of the day becomes water on your back and a determination for you, or to help push that drive in you to want to make a difference and to face or stare down the obstacles that may come each day. I would suggest that leaving for another region, leaving to better yourself with new or better opportunities, or just a desire to take another position in a company or corporation is fine. But leaving because of racism, you'll find yourself running into what you're running from.
Wow. Wow. Means what is your, coming from an entrepreneur's perspective, and those of us who work in corporate or in business period, who may be hitting their head against the wall, who may not be able to turn cold hearts warm, or who are dealing with insecurities on a level that is undescribable. What would you say is the leap that they should look at, or what is the gumption that fused you as an entrepreneur, and that made you jump to start your own business? And what kind of advice would you offer those persons who are doing things in a productive way, but if they really wanted to, they could leave and start their own business? Kind of speak to, how do we preserve that type of energy and innovation that may leave the corporate area and then come and start their own business, but still do the things that they love to do?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's to leave your mark. We talk about going into places and spaces. I simply wanted to leave my mark. And I'll take you back a little bit. I went to Miami University in Oxford, and I grew up in downtown Cincinnati. So two totally different just environments. And when I got to Miami, I wanted to leave because it wasn't fitting. I was experiencing racism, even just systemic racism, being the only African-American in pretty much all of my classes until my senior year. But as I matured in my time at Miami, same here as an entrepreneur, what I'm realizing is that I'm making it a lot, I don't want to say easier, but I'm making the path a little more easier to navigate for those people who are coming behind me. And that was my mission in starting BlaCkOWned. Simply, once I left Miami, I went through a lot of things there, and really trying to find myself and being comfortable with who I was and wanted to express those things. And I think a lot of us deal with that in the workplace. We deal with that as entrepreneurs. That really doesn't change whether you're working for someone else or you're creating it yourself, your own. So for me, I think it's that willingness and that desire to leave a mark, and knowing that someone is going to come behind you, and that it's our job to, make that space a little easier to navigate for those people. So I think for those people here in Cincinnati who are experiencing that and who think that, they can leave the city and that they're going to find it easier elsewhere, I would disagree. I've had the opportunity to live in cities like Atlanta. I've had the opportunity to live in cities, LA. I've been on the West, on the East Coast as well. And you run into these same things wherever you go. And it's our job, me being a Cincinnatian, I wanted to come back home and really just put my energy and work in here in the city. So hopefully that answered your question, but yeah.
It did. No, it did. I want to go to Fran. So Fran, your family is one of maybe the last sole independent promoters in the nation, I think, that has not been bought up by another corporation. But you have an authentic experience, and an authenticity that many promoters are not allowed to have at your level, or don't have at your level. Can you offer some tips on that may play into this conversation on what people can do to be their authentic selves and still operate at a top level without compromising the integrity of their organization or their self?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I don't know. I have to say that I think this is why I think we click so well, Jason and Means, same thing. I think when somebody has that down to earth touch, and it makes people easier to be around. instantly have a trust in what they're saying. I just think when people are authentic, it just strikes you from the second you meet them, and you can just take a deep breath. You can be yourselves around them. I think the concert space is a little less formal of a workspace anyway. You know, we're allowed to wear our black t-shirts, and we're a little less formal than your typical business. But I think being authentic and being able to speak to somebody and be truthful, it does make a huge difference in the impact you have on a community. I think those people who are approachable tend to make the biggest impact. So I guess that's my part of my goal in being approachable, if that answers your question.
No, I think what I hear you saying is that being your authentic self, it gives you power. I think being approachable, meaning that you're open to being vulnerable, is what I hear you saying. And then last, I think not changing your beliefs, and those three principles, I think would help anybody and keep folks inspired to be their best selves. So no, you answered the question. Let's go to Crystal. I know you and I work for corporate. Again, that is good. I'm not saying that's bad, good or bad. That's great, actually. I mean, I'd like to be paid, right? So I think there's some things that, you know, we know that some of our colleagues and others, and you're not representing everybody, nor am I, but I think as we, in a general perspective, what would you tell some of our colleagues who are working in other spaces if they continue to hit their head against the wall, there is no appreciation for their work, and or they are met with microaggressions that may limit their passion to fulfill their work? Give some advice on what you have done if you've experienced this, and what if you haven't, what would you tell someone who has?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, every company culture is structured a little differently. And I think it starts by, you know, advocating, and whether you have an employee resource group, whether there is a leader who you have a relationship with, I think it's looking for the pathways. And ultimately, too, just to be very frank, sometimes, like, I get it. I've been in that seat where you're campaigning and you're advocating and you're doing all the things that you know to do. And it's frustrating, and it can be angering when you feel as though you're not being heard and you're not being seen. I will say something that we did at Kroger, and it was a big part of advocating for this, but really campaigned, like, you know, especially after all of the George Floyd activity, really campaigned for our African-American resource group to put together an allyship guide that was shared broadly internally as well as externally. And it was really raw, it was really direct, it was really relevant to the Black experience, not only in the workplace, but outside of the workplace. And that opened so many conversations. I think such a big part of kind of the tension that we feel, whether it's in society or whether it's in the workplace, it's because conversations aren't being had. Talking about race, talking about disparity, talking about injustice isn't easy, but the only way that you can confront those issues and address those issues and progress and advance is having the conversation. So as Kroger was putting together our new diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, we hosted virtual listening sessions with Black employees where many of the non-Black leaders, managers, they just listened, and they listened to employees express their experiences in the workplace, outside of the workplace. So I think it starts with having the conversations and listening. And if you're, you know, in that seat, I think that's one thing that you can propose is a listening session. It's something that has worked well for us and certainly helped us to shape how we thought about the new plan that we put together. And also it's leaning on your network and calling a friend and, you know, confiding in people and people you trust in the workplace and outside of the workplace, because it's a long road. And as Means mentioned, you know, no matter the company, sometimes there's the perception that the grass is greener on the other side, or maybe the grass is greener in a different city or a different region. It's a US issue. So there are those things, more broadly that we as a country aren't openly and, expressing and talking about. So there's the trickle down effect. But it starts, just with those meaningful, vulnerable, like raw conversations. And I've had many of those, not only over the past year, but really since I've been with Kroger. So it's just, you have to, it's a marathon. It's far from a sprint.
I appreciate that. So I want to make sure we get some questions in from the audience for maybe the next 4 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to end with your final thoughts as the panelists. So Lori, if you could feed in some questions, we'll go from there.
Sure. I've just got a couple from the chat, and then from there, if there's time, if you just want to ask questions out loud to the group, that would be great. But one question from Norris was, I have a definition of Black culture, which may differ from someone else. When we speak of Black culture, what is the high level definition we are working toward?
Anybody want to take that? Means, Bishop?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't necessarily answer what is Black culture. I mean, it's so vast, but what I can say is that as a community, we have to understand that we're still pulling back a lot of what is Black culture because so much was taken away from us. So I think it's important that we keep our mind open in that aspect, but I also think it's okay to understand that we come in different, as they say, shapes and colors and all of the rest of it. So Black culture is this thing that you can't really put a cap on. It can be a cup of coffee. It can also be fashion. It can be it can be art. So there's so many different areas. So I don't necessarily have a definition of what Black culture is, but I think at its basics, it's just simply us being who we are unapologetically, and that culture should be celebrated.
Let's get one more question in, Lori, then we're going to end with last statements from the panelists.
No problem. This is from Victor. Seeking advice, provoking change in the corporate space. How do we influence the company we work for to take real action regarding the things that are being discussed and pushed in this conversation today?
Crystal,
Yeah, so,
you jump in. You hit the buzzer, like boom. Go ahead.
yeah, so I'll build on my remarks there. Oftentimes, businesses, companies are driven by data, right? And I know it seems it's less of the human touch sometimes to feel like, oh, it's a data-driven decision. But I think part of the listening sessions, part of the the conversations, are there any data points? And it could be just again, that person engaging with other people of color to collect their perspectives and opinions and compiling all of that information as part of a formal presentation to leadership or whoever the influencer is in that space to start a deeper, more meaningful conversation. So sometimes it's awareness. And that's what I saw in June. It's just awareness. It was to the point I had a one-to-one conversation with our CEO, Rodney McMullen, shortly after all of the George Floyd activity. And I'm thankful that we have a healthy relationship. But sometimes it was a question of like, Crystal, am I okay to say Black American or is it always African American? And I'm glad that he felt safe enough to ask that question. But again, it goes back to like, the conversations must happen. And what I've seen when those hard conversations start to take place, like the wall comes down, kind of the workplace niceties, once that's off and people are just able to be real and to be raw, I think that's when you start to see true change and transformation happen.
I appreciate that. So let's go. Let's start with Bishop. Give me 3 things that an organization and or people can do to support Black talent in a Black organization. I need you to make it kind of quick because we're gonna get everybody in, and then we're gonna end at 11:45.
I believe when we understand Black culture to the point that we have a serious dialogue as it relates to what is important to Black people. Secondly, I believe that we have a strategy or strategic plan that will attract Black talent to the point that we can operate and grow in the space that we are planted in. And then also believing encouragement as it relates to connection and inspiring individuals through promotion and development will also be a strong network for us to support Black talent.
John and G, they're telling me we got 2 minutes. So just give me three things real quick, and then we'll go to Means and Crystal and Fran.
I think it really boils down to three things. It's one, relationships that can lead into collaborative efforts that potentially will hopefully flood into investments. And I think those investments is what we need within our communities, particularly the Black community, to help cultivate this beautiful thing that we have in our Black ecosystem. So relationships, collaborative efforts, and then investments.
And I only have one because I'm not that smart, but I work in the cultural realm, and I think we just have to reframe inclusion from being the right thing to do to being the smart thing to do. Membership here is higher than it's ever been since we became more inclusive. It's not the right thing. It is the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. You can monetize being decent, and if we just, it's smart. Is quit being an idiot.
I love that. Can I take that quote?
Yeah,
Ken,
you can have it.
means your 3 points, and then Crystal, then Fran.
I tell you what, I'll use one to save time for my friends. Spend your money with Black businesses. Spend your money with Black creatives, and that in itself is huge.
All right, Crystal.
Yep, and I'll build on that. So my three, if you're, at a corporation, if you're in that position, developing, advancing talent. So in some ways that's a given, but it's not always done and executed. If you're in the position, it's buying Black. Yeah, it's going to, by means shop, but then also thinking about your supplier community, like who do you collaborate with? Like, what does your outside counsel look like? What does your advertising firm look like? So just again, partnering and collaborating and investing in more diverse companies. And then again, just using your clout, your access, your privilege that you have.
So we have 20 seconds. Is Fran, did we lose Fran? Did we lose? All right, so Fran, can you give just one thing right quick?
Yeah, partnerships. I think, like